Welcome back, my Nomads. Welcome back to another Bitcast. I'm back at it again with Zach. What's going on, Zach?
Hey, man, how you doing?
Thriving and surviving. So we got a interesting one on the docket today.
Yes.
You gave me the criteria of a what's it called? Overrated, is that the right term? Overrated movie that everybody likes that you kind of feel it's not as good as everybody says it is.
Yes.
And I picked The Joker. I always thought it was The Joker, but apparently it's Joker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Joker. And this was a string of movies that came out when DC was trying to reboot all their movies. So, The Suicide Squad, The Batman. Maybe that's why I thought it was The Joker instead of just Joker. But, yeah. So.
Well, it's because I think they're going to be in specific universes when they have the stuff.
Yeah.
That's the reason why. They
their
put
own microcosm. And I think it's funny that DC is now doing what people told them to do, 10 years ago? Instead of trying to compete with Marvel with your own cinematic universe, just have one-offs like your comic book string of comics that was called Elseworld, DC Elseworld. Just do that with your movies where all the characters are in their own universe, and then you can have your combined cinematic universe if you want to. So, Joker and the Batman, those are going to be like their own little universes. And the Penguin show just came out yesterday.
Well, the Batman's in the alternate Earth reality in the multiverse for Batman. So it's like Earth something 2 or whatever it is. So it is canon. It's just a different version of, Batman stuff.
Well, they keep changing stuff, so I just learned something. All right. So we watched Joker, and this came out in 2019. Now this was the second time I saw this. I'm wondering for you watching it in 2019 versus you watching it now, has your perspective changed? Where there's anything that you feel like you misinterpreted at the time? Because this was my second watch through, and I noticed things through my second watch through that I didn't notice in the first time. So anything changed?
Well, my opinion, 2019 was 4 years ago. It was kind of tough to remember everything I felt then. I mean, my takeaway is pretty much the same. It's a one-off that just a movie by itself just misses the mark and it doesn't know what it wants to be, right? And even if you take the Joker and the Batman saga and all that stuff out of it, or if someone who's watching it for the first time, could you just say this is a good movie without having tie-ins to your beloved characters? For me, the question's answered as no. It's okay. It's entertaining, but it's not good in the sense of just by itself, just a one-off for anything. Even if this wasn't a Batman movie. Or Batman Universe movie.
Got you. I mean, I feel the same way. I feel like, would this be getting as much praise as it is if it wasn't a Joker DC tie-in? Excuse me, I'm a little sick. I don't know, but for me, it doesn't work either way, whether it's a Joker movie or not, And this is just my opinion. I understand people love this movie. It just didn't do it for me the first time, didn't do it for me the second time.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. The music, and I can't pronounce the composer's name. It's Hildur something, but she did amazing. She deserves all the awards she got for this movie. The cinematography is amazing. Like, you could do a whole class on the cinematography in this, and the lenses that he used, and this, that, and the third. But
you know what it reminds me of? Like those, like, not old school, but like those string of World War II movies. You had Saving Private Ryan, late 90s, early mid 2000s. Flags of Our Fathers, Letters of Iwo Jima. You have Band of Brothers, The Pacific. where they're using natural effects, just really good acting and that type of stuff, right, to make a movie without the CGI and all
Yep.
that. This is what this did, where the acting was great, right?
Yep.
The
Yes.
the everything other than the story itself, which takes a lot of, like it says a lot when the acting of a movie's good and you don't fault anyone other than the story plot. Like, what are we doing?
Um. Yeah, and shout out to the cinematographer Lawrence Sher. But yeah, that's my biggest this that's the biggest issue I have with this film is that it's very pretty, but it's hollow. There's like no substance to it, no meat on the bones. It's just all show. And like I said, the music and the cinematography was great, and I feel like we talked about this before offline. I feel like this is like an Oscar shoe-in for sure. Like a pretty movie with no substance, but just over the top, like crazy actors who do
Mm-hmm.
good acting, great acting. Joaquin Phoenix is a great actor. No no argument there.
Yes.
He's definitely an interesting character in real life.
What
Method
good?
actor,
But here's the thing, and I was, I wanted to point this out. Given how the Joker is in terms of the complexity of this character, right?
Mhm.
Can you not have anyone but who is interesting to do this part and not go suicidal like Heath Ledger?
Again, that Heath Ledger stuff was a misconception, but
Well, in a sense of he already had issues, and he was taking a wrong mix of medication, which is what caused it, right? But
he
because he
overworked
had
himself.
issues, well, yeah, he overworked himself, and plus this character was starting to misalign with who he was too, right? That's why he was taking certain medications that had no business being mixed.
He couldn't sleep,
Right. I
overdosed
mean, it
on
just bothers you.
accidental
And
overdose.
Jack Nicholson even, consulted him and all
Try to
this.
warn him.
What I'm saying is that Jared Leto and Joaquin Phoenix did this part without having to do that because of the kind of personalities they are. What I'm saying is to you is that the kind of personalities that takes to do this part right requires you to be different.
So is that why they're hiring nothing but method actors? Jared Leto, Barry Keoghan, Joaquin Phoenix.
You have to be method because you can separate yourself from it when you're done. You could just turn off and move on to the next things. The ones who are actually good at it, right? Like Christian Bales of the world, those kind of people, right? Because then you could just do the next part and you move on and you're, if you're doing something about a president, you could be Abraham Lincoln and you don't have to be the Joker anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. But while they're doing it, they are that character. They don't believe they're an actor playing a character. They believe they are that character.
Well, I know Jared Leto took that to the extreme. However, he's done other parts in the past to make him where, it's not like this was out of the realm of possibility for him to be anything else but weird. Joaquin Phoenix has done very interesting parts too, where he was in love with his phone, right? So it's not like this stuff isn't, you can't have someone who is fragile in the mind space for this, right? Because
No,
you got to learn how to compartmentalize. You have to learn how to be this person and all this because if you're going to method act with this particular character is flat out evil, then you're going to have to start acting that way, which means you can't feel sorry for yourself. You can't do the things that will allow you, which you would have to chemically induce yourself to cope. You know what I mean? So these guys did it in a very successful way. They did it in very different ways, right? And I even would say that I like Joaquin Phoenix's version of the Joker versus Jared Leto's version. And if the Batman if the Batman ever brought in the Joker, which I wish they won't because it's been played time and time again, you want other character villains. But if they had to, I would like Joaquin Phoenix's version in there.
Well, remember, in canon, the Batman's Joker is Barry Keoghan. Remember that outtake that they put at the end of the credits? Barry Keoghan's Joker, where he's very grotesque. He actually has a skin condition that the director talked about. That's why he looks like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
I know
I'm
the way
like,
that they go, but I like this version that he did now. The direction that just because I don't like the direction of how they wanted to landscape the character doesn't mean he doesn't do a good job. You can separate the two.
so would you rather them retcon that post credit scene in the Batman and go a different direction, like more in the Joaquin Phoenix direction?
Yeah, or that could have been a dream too. Who knows? You can make that spin anything. A post credit scene doesn't mean anything. I'm serious though. You know?
I mean, I feel the same way. I'm so sick of post credit scenes. I'm like, Marvel
Post credit
did them to the
scenes,
ground.
yeah.
Let's stop with them. Like, just have it in your movie or don't. I'm not gonna stay to watch a post. I might take a glance on YouTube, but I'm not staying after all that. Especially if your movie's like 2 hours and 45 minutes or more.
Yeah.
I'm not staying for the credits. Back in the day, I would, but I'm married with a kid now. Like, I don't got time for that. Sorry. I don't got time for the previews in the beginning. Even though I like the trailers in the beginning of a movie, I ain't got time for that no more. So, but I hear what you're saying, man. I mean, I still believe an actor's actor could play the Joker successfully and entertainingly. But I see what you're saying, But yeah, like this movie is like an Oscar shoo-in. I feel like a very pretty movie with no substance and just weirdo type of acting with craziness in it, and it
Well,
was
he is
considered
crazy.
for Oscar.
Right. That's the whole point. And I think that takes away from the character too. It's like the movie as well. It's like, all right, just go be weird. Are we going to use the weirdness of the Joker to actually to fill in the actual character development of him? Because that's a cop out.
I was just about to say that because Todd Phillips, the director, who's also the director of the Hangover trilogy, he was known as a comedic director. He did this. He co-wrote and directed this movie. He talks about how they went off script. I mean, off the origin story, and they made their own character named Arthur Fleck out of nowhere, and was like, "Hey, this could be a version of the Joker." And as a comic book fan, I was like,
wasn't his last name Blank in canon because they don't know his last name, so just call him Blank?
And he had like many aliases, right? Like Jack White was one of them or something like that. But yeah, and I'm just like, I don't feel like Arthur Fleck for me fits as the Joker. We talk about this all the time. When you're changing these characters for modern audiences, you gotta know what the essence of the character is, what makes this character. The Joker is a criminal mastermind who's also a genius chemist. I don't see Arthur Fleck being
who has an unknown background, which is what adds to the appeal. You don't need an origin story to make him feel a certain way, which is a whole nother rabbit hole of critiques, which, we were kind of talking about yesterday. Says, I just feel like that you're putting in a lens of a crazy person, and because of that, there is no consistency or linear storytelling, and it's all over the place and it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it's just not enjoyable because of that.
Especially because the Arthur is used as the main narrator, as the audience's eye. So we're going through this journey with him, but he's not a reliable source. He's not a reliable narrator.
He's not even appealing. We're using certain events to make him feel like we can empathize with him, and it doesn't do a very good job of that. Like, okay, yeah, who wasn't bullied and have all the, like, who doesn't have these issues? There's plenty of people who do. And it doesn't mean that that's a justification for him to act that certain way. And what I also said to you that I was going to kind of reiterate was that I feel like we start conflating insanity with evil, and people can't be evil without insanity, where maybe the reason why people are insane is because of the evil, right? And we can't just take that for what it is and just move with it. There's always got to be some kind of like voices in the head, some kind of compulsory thing, and sometimes people do it just because they want to, and we can't fathom that because inherently good people can't get to that level, right? And there always has to be a buildup as to why someone's got to do this, and in this case it was just him being nuts in the head, and then he just decided to turn on the switch and just continue being nuts. And that's just another thing. Like, how are we supposed to sympathize with that? We're normal people. We can't. That's the whole point, right?
And to your point, it not only like to your point, like in this movie, his laughing is a medical condition, right? And it's a real condition. Like people really have this. Um, Nowadays, it's like done to the head, like you said. Like now, it has to be a technical thing that really exists that this person has, which causes them to be evil. And there's always somebody like, well, technically, there is a condition that causes such and such, and maybe this is why he's evil. I'm like, we don't always need that, man. Like, some people are just messed up in the head. You know, some people just have issues. We don't always need that. And like you said, you know, mental illness doesn't always equate to evil, and it shouldn't, because that's not true. You know, we all have our issues, but come on, I feel like there's been an obsession in the last 5 to 10 years of just mental illness. So we want to turn this one character into an anti-hero. You know, all the villains are becoming anti-heroes now. And why are they anti-hero? Because of this technical illness. Because of this. I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Have you seen how many like real life murderers or school shooters, like how many of them are actually messed up in the head versus ones who want to just hurt people? And majority of the time, they just want to hurt people.
Yeah.
Why can't that just be like that with the character too? Like, you know, there's been a philosophical debate for a long time. You have philosophy background. It's a very John Locke or Thomas Hobbes type of mentality where it's one or the other, where you're inherently born bad, and we have laws and religion to kind of put us and steer us in the right direction, which is Thomas Hobbes, which is what the Leviathan's all about. Or you have John Locke mentality where everyone's born with an equal slate, and it's up to you to make that determination if you're going to be good or bad. And it's based on choice. And then you have the baby in the woods raised by wolves type of thing, right? You know, that whole theory. So, you know, it goes back and forth and all this other stuff, you know, blah, 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 blah. And this has been around for 500 years. And for whatever reason, we go through this every single time in terms of characters in movies now when there's an adaptation of something. Person's crazy. Was Charles Manson crazy, or was he just bad? He was a smart, to the point person, and it may come across as crazy, but he was very deliberate. That doesn't sound crazy to me when you start doing things on a premeditated way. It's just how it is. That may seem crazy to you, but that's why I said evil's what creates the insanity, right? In terms of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you on that, man. And like, there's plenty of times, like, really, I just had a brain fart. Whoa. You said evil equates to the...
Evil's the one that fosters the environment for insanity for normal, good-hearted people. It's like having the conceptualization of eternity or infinity. We can't do that. We naturally are limited by the end. That's how we are. So when we try to conceptualize infinity, we can't. It's the same thing with insanity or evil. Because inherently good people see evil a certain way, you have to equate it to the closest thing, which people to them thinks is just craziness. You get what I'm saying? So it's that type of thing.
Gotcha. Now, we talked about, really, the movie is pretty bahalo. And what we mean by that is, like, someone sit down and tell me, what was Arthur's motivation in this movie? What was his ultimate goal? What was driving the story?
That's what I asked yesterday. It was like, what are we trying to do with this? What does he want? It doesn't seem like he wants anything. He just wants to just do and release his catharsis everywhere because he feels wronged. Like, but that's not a tangible storyline for someone who's supposed to be complex. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it's like some people would argue, I see online, his motivation, his goal was to spread happiness and joy through the world. I'm like, I guess that's more like a character of a person, but what was his ultimate goal? What was his goal during this movie that drove the plot? There was none. There was no plot. And even Arthur himself was too reactionary. Like, he
He's
didn't drive the
compulsory
story.
reactionary. It was a compulsiveness to him to react to everything.
Exactly. Like
And he's
anything that
not like
happened.
that. That character's not like that. That's why that's why
Exactly.
he's as good as he is. That's why Batman is such a tough time with him. Because he doesn't react. He's premeditated. He's very calculated in his approach. So how do you find someone who may or may be sociopathic in some capacity and is willing to risk anything to him in order to get his goal while still succeeding all the time? Like, that's the reason why he had the issues that he did. But I just see that they wanted to go down a different path. And it's always
I mean,
it's always like, what kind of relationship did you have with your mom type of path, you know?
I feel like the stereotypical, what's it called, kind of person, anti-society person or whatever, was in this movie. Like everything about him, he lived with his mom. He's an older gentleman who lives with his mom. He like people pick on him. He's skinny. He's small. You know, he doesn't stand up for himself. He has this condition. You know, it's like all in the playbook. It's like they just picked like a guy. It was like, oh, I wonder what kind of mindset a school shooter is. So they just put it in a movie. And then what does he do? Spoiler alert, he shoots Murray Franklin on live TV point blank in the head. And I'm like, I guess. You're trying to get me to. It felt like for me, you're trying to get me to sympathize with a school shooter. That's what it kind of felt like with me.
Most of these school shooters deserve to be iced. Like, they're not insane. They just want to hurt people. Like, I don't understand. But that's society. Like, we talked about this in a greater level. Like, this is where we're at with society. Like, we have to empathize with certain people, you know, like the Osama bin Ladens, the Hitlers of the world now, because that's the hot thing. And we got to sympathize with bad guy when sometimes there are just lines of good and bad. Like, it's that easy. It doesn't have to be this gray all the time. There are labels, you know, and you know, it's not just this whole, I don't know. It's just old. The storytelling of the gray and anti-hero thing is overdone. It's old. It's like with Venom, it's like with Deadpool, it's like with whoever, and the Punisher. And it's like, all right, cool. We understand they're complex, and we understand we're supposed to feel a certain way about them, but maybe they're doing their own thing because they're selfish. What's wrong with making a story about that?
But see, I'll push back about the distinction between the Punisher and the Joker. The Punisher is different. Frank Castle
he does his own thing.
Sees his family get murdered in front of him, his kids and his wife, because of corruption. And what does he do? He goes
but
out
he
for
also hunts superheroes too, because the Kingpin hires him too. He goes after Superman. He goes after Wolverine. Not Superman. He goes after Spider-Man. He goes after Wolverine. He goes after all these characters, Fantastic Four. So it's not just, he does it for his own selfish reasons too, right? He's not altruistic in that sense.
In the beginning, for argument's sake, he was a little altruistic. And the difference between him and Joker is Arthur Fleck just kills people who bullied him. And I'm like, okay. So a guy lied on you and you lost your job, so your idea is to stab him in the neck until he dies and bleeds out. I'm sorry, sense. But I'm not going to sympathize or empathize with a guy who's just killing people just because. And even his whole speech at the end of the movie with Robert De Niro, when he's like, society, people look down on me, they don't pay. My thought was the same exact thing that Robert De Niro's character said. Oh, you sound like there's a lot of pity that you want. I'm like, yeah, like cry me a river, bro. Like, is it just news to you that people don't care? Like, this is life. Like, people like to say life is like a dance. No, life is like a wrestling match. Like, you got to be on your toes, bro. Like, your opponent doesn't care. They're going to choke you out when they get the chance. Like, you want me to sympathize with this guy? I don't know, man. Like, I'm the kind of guy, when I watch something or I get a piece of entertainment, I need to find a point to relate to that character. I need a point to empathize and sympathize with that character. I can't do that with Arthur Fleck. I just can't. I
He's the
don't
wrong
have
character for that.
anything.
There's no point. Like
Yeah.
certain people we shouldn't. Certain characters we should. It's not the point of it. His point is for him to be bad. So when there is a Batman movie that comes out with him, how are you supposed to draw the parallels? Oh, maybe the Joker has points. No, it defeats the purpose. It defeats the whole purpose at this point. Batman's good.
Well, see,
Joker's bad.
See, a good villain does have good points. It's just they cross a line that shouldn't be crossed, right? But Arthur just crosses the line for crossing line's sake.
And we explain everything away because of his background. It's it's okay. He had a tough. I'm so a lot of people do. Bruce Wayne did too. Just because he grew up rich, he had no parents. They were murdered right in front of him. You didn't see him running around killing people.
And I'm like, people are like, "Oh, this movie is so good. It showed you how to sympathize with a character like that." And I'm like, "No,
it doesn't.
I didn't. There's no substance to it. It's just a guy dancing around and being strange and wants pity." And I'm like, "No, bro. I just can't connect with it. Yeah. I can't connect. It looks very good. It sounds very good. But other than that, I couldn't get into the film. I'm sorry. And I think it's highly overrated. I'm looking at reviews for this, audience scores. People are giving it 10 out of 10s. And I'm like, I guess I'm just
because of the character themselves.
Yeah. And this goes down. This is a genre called edgelords. There's certain kind of people who like edgelords. And I see more and more people online who fall in that category. And I'm like, of course you like this movie. Of course. But hey, I'm not going to judge. It's just a movie. I'm not going to judge anybody on their favorite movies, but I'm like, I don't know, man. It's pretty. It looks good. Music was great, but Joaquin was killing it. Todd Phillips was a good director. It just didn't resonate with me. I didn't connect with it. That's all. That's all.
Well, moving on. I know you had some stuff you want to talk about, want some opinions on. So let's get to it. What you got?
Joker. Not Joker. Damn. Sony announces the PS5 Pro for $700.
Isn't it disc driveless?
Has no disc. Disc drive is $80. And then the stand has no stand. The stand is $30.
What's the difference?
So if you want to get the whole shebang, it's going to cost you like $800
before taxes.
Over $800. Yes. Which is insane. And then
which is going to be $900 out here.
How did they announce it? Oh yeah. Yeah. And how did they announce the PS5 Pro? By showing you footage from The Last of Us Part 2. And I'm like, bro, why are you showing us? No, it came out on PS3, remember?
No, it was PS4 because it was. Well, the first one did, but the second one came out in 2020.
Yeah.
PS4, yeah, right before the PS. Yeah,
my bad. Yeah, well, yeah, I think they showed the original Last of Us, not the Part 2, a PS3 game for their showcase. I'm like, come on, bro, come on. And you can't even tell the difference. I understand it's on YouTube. YouTube is highly compressed. But I'm like, the average Joe's not going to tell the difference between the high fidelity mode on a PS5 versus the PS5 Pro high resolution. Not to mention, it's not native 4K, I don't think. I heard they were upscaling, so I don't believe it's native 4K. If you say upscaling, it's not native 4K. So you're paying they estimated they talked about the specs. It's a 45% increase on performance and fidelity for
If I get a
$700.
Pro anything, like, I got the new iPhone Pro, the iPad Pro, it better be a considerable difference from the flagship model, and it's not.
Yep. Oh, okay. So they're promising a fluid 4K and 60 frames per second across the board for games. I'm thinking for $700, it's going to be 4K 120 frames per second, not 4K 60. Like, come on, bro. $700, and the PS5 hasn't gone down in price. It's still $500. If I was in the market for a new system, I would just get the PS5. It already comes with a disk drive. It already comes with a stand, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference between how it looks with the Pro, like guaranteed. Like, this is ridiculous. And the only reason Sony's doing this is because they have no competition. Xbox is shit the bed. Nintendo is non-existent as always. So, and honestly, for $700, you could probably build yourself a PC, a gaming PC that would run 4K 60 easily. So, I don't see this selling a lot. I mean, I know a few Sony bros who would definitely buy this.
I
But
wouldn't
other
get
than
it.
that
I'm
small
happy with
niche,
my
I don't
PS5 the
know.
way it is because it has a disc drive, and I don't have to spend any more money on it.
You feel me? Like, exactly. Like, you have a PS5. That can upscale to 4K. And you probably can't tell the difference from the Pro. And
No.
this one says the Pro is upscaling to 4K too, so it's not native 4K. So I don't. Yeah, it says 28% faster RAM and 45% faster rendering for $700 in this economy. Maybe if it was a different economy, we'd be having a different conversation. But bro, I don't know if anybody else is going to the grocery store recently,
It's
but
bad. It's bad.
it is.
It's bad. Even,
It's
I'm
crazy.
thankful. It's like, I do extremely well, but dang, it's
I know.
bad.
I'm like going to the store. I'm like, if I could feel it, I know some other people are feeling it, bro. Like, this is crazy. I get like 5 things and I'm already at like $100, man. Like, what the hell? It's just crazy.
It's cheaper just eating out, believe it or not. It's crazy. But
I know it used to be the other way. Now it's like, bro, I might as well just get a meal already prepared. But oh my gosh, this is crazy. I don't know what's going on with Sony,
Sony's just kind of going through a lot of stuff because a lot of their studios that they've acquired just hasn't really worked for them yet. So we got to see how Bungie shakes out. And, this is a cash grab. And I just don't think the re-releases, like, people are being a lot more stringent with their budget. They're not going to spend money on something like this if it's exactly the same thing, right? Like, it doesn't work like that. Like, you're starting to see a change in tech where, how like the phones every year upgrades were pretty much the same. You're starting to see a sizable difference in the upgrades now, because otherwise, how are you going to justify to people to buy it? You have to,
yeah.
because they're not going to spend the money otherwise.
Because a few years ago, people stopped the show statistically stop upgrading their phones. So people were fine having
I waited 3.5
7-year-old
years for mine,
phones.
man.
Same. I do the same. I keep my phones because the uptick isn't enough to upgrade and spend all that money.
Now it's a big difference. Like, I had the 13, now I got the 16. Huge difference.
Now it is. Yeah, now it is. But and that's because the companies knew they had to do something. They had to like double the speeds of all their phones, and
I think that's why AI is kind of going the way it is, because this is going to be the determining factor of how you can make something that's virtually the same thing. It's like with cars. How do you actually make and flesh out the distinctive features? That's the way to do it. My AI can do this. Well, mine can do that, right? And I think that's where we're at with it, not to digress so much.
I know. Because it's like people aren't going to. I'm sorry, Sony. People aren't going to buy this because this this is freaking ridiculous. And I know we talked about this before, but people, like, statistically, people are playing older games. I think it's like 60% of the time people are playing older games that are 6 years old instead of buying new games because, frankly, new games just
Yeah.
aren't cutting it anymore, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've
And
played Mass
I
Effect
myself, I've
dozens of
been
times.
playing older games.
I've been playing
Yeah,
Borderlands. We've been playing
exactly.
Borderlands, Mass Effect. Ghost of Tsushima. All
I
kinds of
think the
stuff, man.
newest
It's
game
like,
that I've played is Space Marine. That's it. That's the
yeah,
newest game I've played. And that's a
it's
game
fun.
that's designed like a Xbox 360 game. Like old school back in the day, just having fun, ripping shit and beating people up. Like, it's fun as hell. There's
You know
no
why I got it? Because
agenda,
the
there's no this,
developers
that, and the
laid.
third.
Do you know the reason why I got it was because the developers put out a clear roadmap as to what they want to do, and I'm like, all right, you guys actually are being
Mm.
transparent with what you want to do, and you're going to follow it. Like, this is great. Like there's going to be a horde mode. There's going to be all kinds of stuff with that. Like, the content, it's worth the money. Like, you see it now, you're like, okay, this is worth it. Because you're investing in the studio to provide you something, and it's just, I mean, just given the other stuff
Mm.
lately that's just come out, I'm not interested.
Dude, like, you're preaching to the choir, man. I think the newest game before that I played was Jedi Survivor, and that's like a year or two old now,
It's a
I
year
think.
old now.
So
Great game. Great game.
that
But
just
yeah,
goes to
definitely.
show. Yeah, that just goes to show. Like, I'm only playing old stuff, like you said, Ghost Tsushima, God of War, stuff like that. Like, older games. I've even playing Ghost Recon Breakpoint and stuff. I'm even playing old PS2 games through my emulation and everything. So I don't see. I'm sorry, Sony. I don't see it happening. But on to the next one. Um, so you and I both follow a YouTuber named Star Wars Theory,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a campaign to get rid of this guy simply
I
because he
saw.
doesn't want to follow the agenda and follow the narrative. And I thought it was funny because I'm like, yo, he put up a video recently where they what's it called? They monetized his video. He did so 6 years ago. He did a fan film, a Vader fan film, and he didn't monetize it per the agreement that he had with Disney. Right? So 6 years ago, what is that? 2019? I mean 2018. All right. So this is clearly around the time that Disney owned Star Wars because The Force Unleashed came out in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So he had an agreement with Disney. I won't monetize this thing. And all of a sudden, after all this hate and stuff and trying to get him demonetized and stuff because he didn't like the Acolyte, they out of nowhere monetize his video, put ads on it. He's not getting that money. They put ads on it, but then they give him a copyright strike. I'm like, come on, bro. Y'all not even slick with it now. Like, y'all not even slick with it. How you gonna put his video in monetization, take the money from his video? He doesn't get any of the money, and then you give him a copyright strike. So
It's
there's
pretty
clearly stuff
wild.
going on now. Yo, it's wild, bro. Like, apparently, Stupendous Wave channel I also watch too about Star Wars. They're getting knocked. He's getting knocked too. So it's like, clearly, if you don't like the Acolyte, they're trying to shut you down, trying to label you
And
as
he
a
refused to
hater, a
be paid by
racist, or
Disney
whatever.
for giving a good review for Outlaws.
Yep. Well, he said it was from the offer came from Ubisoft,
Well,
not Disney.
same thing
I
at
mean,
this point.
basically, they
Yeah.
function the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, he
They
was
both
like,
have
"Yeah, get
vetted
out of here.
interest to
I'm
make
not
sure the
doing."
game is successful.
Yep. And have you watched his videos playing Star Wars Outlaw?
Yes.
I watched some, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting this game.
I
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna just put some mods on Starfield and play it as a Star Wars game. That's what I'm gonna do. And they have mods that turn Starfield
I
from
know.
top to bottom into a
They're
Star Wars
expensive.
feature.
And game currency. I like his stuff, dude. Like, I'm glad he's sticking up for himself, but he's not the only one who's going against the grain of what these guys should do. And let's be real, the studios aren't winning. And I wanted to also point out, because also regarding him, he's also getting into a beef with a Forbes writer.
Yep.
Which is Paul Stassi, I want to say his name is. And he's been a contributor with Forbes for a long time. And they're having a beef on X over this stuff, and it's like, look, he has a point. Like Star Wars theory. Like, he has a point. Like, I don't know why. People want to misconstrue something with him just because he's against all of this stuff. And like, let's be real, it's not like he's in the minority with this. It's the majority of gamers or people who consume content are tired of this BS, dude. It's just how it is. Like, it's just wherever this power of the minority came from, where you have to have this agenda type of thing just become the norms. Like, people are done with it, and you can thank our political climate for that or whatever it is, but I think people are starting to get the balls to just like, enough is enough.
I know. Like, at the end of the day, if your thing has poor writing, doesn't have any thought to it, we're going to call it out. Has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with gender,
orientation,
or you shouldn't be getting a job because of that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I feel like Boeing's paying the price for that, because literally their planes are falling apart and their spaceships. And I bet you it's because of that. It's just, let's get some qualified, let's get some qualified people in the right positions that they should be, other than how they're identified. Our political structure is this way right now. And it's just like, what are we doing?
It's like,
why?
For resumes now, they're just like, are you gay? Are you a minority? Check. Okay, we're going to give you a call. It's like, what? Come on, bro. Like, it's got to have more than that, Like, I don't know. I didn't even bother watching The Acolyte. I just watched reviews of it. I've watched, what's it called? What are they called? Recaps of each episode. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That retcons everything. That's not canon. And I did that simply because I just don't trust Disney anymore. And there's something worth more than money. It's called time. When you get older, you learn this. And I'm not going to waste my time on something I know I'm not going to enjoy. I lost faith in Disney a long time ago, so I don't watch any of their content, Marvel or Star Wars alike. So that's why I haven't tuned in to anything in the past couple of years.
Well, but it is what it is.
Enough of that, because we always talk about Star Wars.
We'll always find a way to talk about Star Wars, but it makes points because it's pretty much every corporation acts this way. Doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Nowadays, yeah. Pretty much. I just want to say this doesn't enact positive change. This is just the appearance of positive change. It's not actual positive change. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, we got more fun stuff to talk about. And if we got corporations acting in whatever way, I feel like politics is pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about two things, both sides. We're going to talk about JD Vance and the anointed Trump, self-proclaimed, and then Kamala. Let's start with Trump and JD first. Last week we talked about the Springfield, Ohio thing and the Haitian immigrants, allegedly eating cats and making videos of that. Well, there was never any real truth to that, and JD Vance admitted as such, and Trump went along with it anyway, even though you knew that. But there have been independent journalists confirming that it's not them that's eating it, but they're doing it in other places. And it's taken away from the fact that
No.
there's a huge problem with these massive migrants moving to this, you're displacing them in one place and putting them in a place where the infrastructure can't even sustain it. And there's real problems, right? Like clinics don't have the ability to take care of these people, hospitals, towns that have 15, 20,000, you're doubling their size of their population just with this. Like it doesn't make sense. And it's taken away from the actual issues with the clowner. It's a circus.
So there is evidence that people are eating animals on the streets.
Yeah.
It's just not migrants. It's crackheads, American crackheads on the streets. And they're on camera saying, no, I'm American. Like, I believe it. No accent, no nothing. They're just crackheads. Or people on drugs.
Which should show, like, maybe we got to concentrate on this because we've talked about this for a while. The degradation of our society in terms of mental illness, drug use, and all this stuff has just kind of like it's completely decayed our society and the fabrics of our foundation of everything. And we're putting the needs of people who are coming in here in a way that they should not be coming in here, and we should be concentrating on that. But that's a topic for another day.
Well, we do live in a society. Edgelords unite.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole because I have strong feelings on it, but it is what it is. However, Trump went along with it, and it makes the point, regardless of what it is and how insane the thing is, the point remains the same. I live in a place compared to a lot of people that I know on the East Coast who aren't affected by mass migration. I live in a place that's heavily affected by migration. I'm 6 hours away from the border, and this is one of the top places in the country where I live, top 5, where people who immigrate here illegally live here. And I'm going to give you a couple things as to how this affects you. Driving, lack of insurance, right? So if you get hit by someone who has no insurance, guess who's the one who pays for that? You do. So I got hit by someone 6 years ago who was underinsured, which means they did not have the minimum requirements to pay for the car accident. I had my wrist broken and I accumulated $55,000 of medical bills. I had to pay for that personally, out of pocket for it, because his insurance only paid for so much. Mine paid the rest, but my rates went up for that, even though I wasn't at fault, because I had to sue my own insurance company. But I had to front this money and then get reimbursed by it, dude.
Which is crazy in itself.
So we have that. That's a real legitimate concern, right? You have infrastructure that's not meant for this, right? Like there's a million different things that people in the Northeast that tend to have the strong opinions that people should do this. Don't live in places where this is affected. People in Florida probably feel the same way. People, Coast Guard, Border Patrol, like there's just, you have sex trafficking, right? There's a constant, you always see news out here. Like you see kids in shipping containers out here get, rescued before they're shipped off somewhere. It's not just kids, it's women, it's all this stuff. We're one of the most heavily sex trafficked areas in the entire world for a reason. You find them in some train yard or something, dude. Like it's just this type of stuff happens because we can't keep track of who's coming in, right? And then you add terrorism, you add all of this and that, and blah, 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 and this is what you get, right? And what are you supposed to do with them? I mean, they're people. You can't just leave them out on the street, right? Like, that's just not how that should be. So it turns into a whole ethical concern as well. It's like, all right, what do we have to do, right? And yeah, that's all I got to say about it. Moving on. Kamala Harris today talked about how if someone broke into her house, she would shoot them. And she's a gun owner, and a lot of people had some things about that. And this is completely contradicting the fact that she said numerous times about how she's all for red flag laws, police checking up on you to make sure your guns are in a secure location, unnecessary things, blah, 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 right? and it's a complete 180. And I think it's kind of we're at a point where gun ownership crosses, for the first time in a long time, crosses party lines. It's not an ideological concern. You have a lot of people on the left who own weapons now. It's not just a right thing, because people have a right to their self-defense, right? And live in a place like where I do, where guns are very common, and a lot of crime is conducted with weapons. Even if you take all the guns away and you make it illegal, the people committing the crimes are still going to be able to have influx of guns. Having these laws is not going to take illegal guns away. All it's going to do is make it harder for you to defend yourself, and then you get prosecuted for that, right? So I was just curious, you live in a place where guns aren't necessarily, they're not prohibited, but they're not encouraged either. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think, excuse me. I think we talked about it before, where I was like, I'm all for guns. um, I believe education is the best route. I believe we should start teaching children how to properly handle guns, how to
Yes.
properly clean them,
Yes.
shoot them.
Yes.
Start at a young age. That way, we don't have as many accidental deaths. People talk about all those accidental deaths. Like, you're most likely to get shot by a gun someone knows. Well, educate that person.
Accidentally versus murder. It's an overwhelming majority on that.
Yeah, right. So I think we should educate them. I mean, I also have my whole philosophy of, like, we should teach kids self-defense in school. We should teach them how to fight. We should teach them military drills and fitness, but that's just me. But back to guns. Yeah, I think everybody has the right to guns. Now, obviously, I don't know. I'm not a politician. Obviously, if somebody has some red flags like mental illness or something,
Well, you're a
they should go on
person with
watch
common
list.
sense. A politician shouldn't have to be the one to determine what is and isn't common sense, right? Just talk to someone who's a parent, someone
Right.
who has a family that like you can speak on that. I feel like that's more than enough.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, I hope it's okay. I mentioned your wife is a teacher. If not, I'll take it out. But your wife's a teacher. I think teachers, no matter what kind of school you go to, should be trained in guns and should be, have firearms in the school. And if you're worried about your kids being around a firearm, teach the kids about guns and how to handle them. But obviously, lock it up in the classroom with a key only the teacher could have, or a fingerprint safe or whatever. So if anything goes down, yo, what's up? I'm seeing stuff online after that school shooting where people are like showing pictures of their school, like, oh, my school, all the staff has guns, so let somebody try come up here and shoot something. They getting snuffed out, so something like that. You feel me? Like, I just think education, because I like you said, I'm in an area where there's not as many guns as where you're at, and I'm around a lot of people who have a lot of opinions about guns, and I'm like,
you're in that weird spot in Delaware that's like in between very blue and very red, right? So it clashes.
I'm like, but have you touched a gun? Have you fired a gun? Have you seen, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of people. Did the
first time you shoot a gun was with me when you came out here years ago?
Yes. Okay. I mean, I've been around fake guns before then, and I was taught how to handle fake guns,
which is good.
But I never touched a real one. Like, I went to a military school, and even though the guns were fake, if you played around like some kids did and point the barrel, they would flip out on you. They'd put you in detention for the longest time. I forgot what it was called, but the way the chiefs would drill you in detention and stuff, it was a name for it, but I forgot what it was called.
Well,
but
you went to military school with Navy ranks, just so everyone knows.
Yes, senior chiefs. a lot of
Yeah,
those.
whole
But
different thing.
they they did not play. They did, yeah. All the military teachers were that, and then we had regular teachers who were also vets. Who were some were Army, some were Navy, some
No.
So, but yeah, it they did not play. So even though I never touched a real gun, I knew how to handle it per se. You never point the barrel, even if you're playing around. You don't do that. You don't. First of all, you don't play around where there's a gun around at all. Like there's no joking around. Hey, dude, like
Right.
that'll get you. That'll get a punch. Somebody will punch you in the mouth for that. So I just think there needs to be more education about this, and I feel like we're in a time where education is frowned upon and people just want to have opinions instead of education. And so
Yeah.
they think, oh, you want guns? Oh, you're such and such. It's like, all right. And in this day and age, I'm at this point in my life where I'm like, if you come to me and say 2 + 2 is 5, I'm like, cool, you're right. Peace. I'll probably never talk
Oh,
to you ever again. Peace out.
like what Keanu Reeves has said. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you come to me and I say something, and you're like, oh, so you're a such and such. I'm like, cool, whatever. You're dead to me. I'll never talk to you ever again. Peace out. Like if you're just gonna judge me on one thing and you probably don't have any education on it, and obviously I'm not a gun expert, but I'm not gonna judge anybody for their opinions, So, but
Right.
nah.
Here are my couple thoughts on this because you know me, right? I have tons of them. One,
Mm-hmm.
it is a right as an American to have a weapon as long
Yep.
as you have not committed any felonies that prevents you from having one. It's the Second Amendment
Right.
for a reason, right? So don't let anyone tell you otherwise of what it is. The next thing is weapons as a whole of what people have been able to get in terms of what civilian weapons have been haven't really changed in 60 years, 70 years. ARs have been around that long. High capacity magazine pistols, all this stuff hasn't changed that long. But what has changed? People have changed. You see the rise of school shootings when our parents, when they went to high school, they had rifle racks in their, friends' cars. They had this. Everyone was armed going to school like it was a normal thing. But why didn't you have school shootings the way that you do now? Well, it's a degradation of society. It's a lot of different things of what led up to it. That's open to debate. But how do you solve it? It's a lot of different things. And we know family core structure and what it is, what we actually prioritize as a culture is completely different, and people rather just concentrate on themselves and just focus on themselves, and even parents. And this is what happens. This is why you get the shooters that you do. Like when Columbine happened in the late 90s, that shocked the world because that was the first time something that awful happened. And it just started a trend. Like people are lost. And for me, it's like, look, I have a son. I'm trained to use weapons in a very precise, methodical way, more than most people. But I have a understanding and a appreciation for what they can do if it's with the right person or the wrong person. And if there's a wrong person with the wrong mentality who wants to harm me or my family, guess what? That's it, you know. And I feel like that there needs to be more conversations on what the root cause of this is. We feel like we got to increase the age limit because the 18-year-old 15 years ago is different than the 18-year-old now, I'm more than welcome to have that conversation because it is different. It's a night and day difference. The 18-year-olds when we went to high school are different than the ones now. It's just flat out different. Just being an adult now doesn't happen until your mid 20s. It's not like that being an adult when we were 18 was like when we were 18 either, right? But it was still different. The mentality was different, right? You still had a fair amount of people who decided to start their lives, start their careers without their parents. Like there was still that many amount of people. Now it's not, dude. It's like there's no basic coping mechanisms. There's no ability to understand that the first thing you feel wronged, you can't just exhort to violence. There's a lot of different things. And I feel like when it comes to guns and gun control, the first thing we want to do is like fix the apparent issue I'm saying that term loosely, which is let's just get rid of guns. Let's just find a way to make it harder for people to get. Well, here's the issue with that. How do you do that in a successful way where we already have more guns illegally on the street than we can even think of, right? There's not even a number because it's that high. The average gun per owner is 9 guns per one person, right? Imagine how many are illegal on the street that way. Like the guy who went to try to kill Chump had a partially followed off identification number on the rifle. You can 3D print. You can make rifles now with parts. It's not like you could just go to the store and buy it. There's a lot of different.
You can 3D print guns now.
You can. There's different ways of doing this, man. Like I mean, it's crazy. And if you take guns away, like we've talked about this earlier with the Hobbs and Locke thing, like it's not like the rest of the world is devoid of violence if you take guns out. England has a huge issue with knives. You know what their conversation they're having right now is? How do you make knives illegal? We're going to resort to whatever method it is until there's nothing left. That's just how we are as people, dude. It's like, so what are we going to do? We take it away from us, right? Where then what? You get held up, your house gets robbed, and then I have an 8-month-old child. You think someone's going to rob my house with a gun and is going to live? You're kidding yourself, right? And it's just, I don't know why this. See, and here's the thing with the Kamala thing. This is the equivalent to the left with gun control that the right is with abortion. There has to be a reckoning and understanding that, you know what, you have to kind of start being rational in terms of your argument. Because if you're going to continue alienating a large group of the population with this gun thing, you're going to lose. Just like the people on the right are starting to come towards the realization that abortion, regardless of how you feel about it, there needs to be some kind of limit with it. You can't just outlaw it completely. There needs to be some kind of understanding with it. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should have some kind of time period where it's okay up to 12 weeks, whatever it is. And this is the left's version of that. It's guns. Because there's a lot of people with guns now because they live in places where it's not safe. And because of that, as long as you haven't committed crimes, you should buy one. You should own one. Now, when my kid's old enough, when my kids are old enough, 6, 7, I'm going to start teaching them, using firearms in real life, real actual firearms. I'm going to start them with BB guns, paintball, like basic things to get them to the point where they're going to have an understanding early of what this stuff is. Right? It's like teaching someone how to drive a car when they're 15. Do you have an understanding that if you hit someone, they can't respawn and still talk to you? They're gone. It's the same thing. And I really, truly hope that we figure out a way to have kids, like teenagers, like kids, just instill in them early that life is precious and we should appreciate that. And we're just devoid of that right now.
To your point, like I live in like car accident central, so your solution wouldn't be to take away all the cars, would it?
Can't. I mean, what are you going to do? Just have it at 35 miles an hour everywhere? Like it comes to the cause and effect, right? Like the amount of murder.
And where I live, they don't have public transportation like New York. I mean, they do, but it's not as complex.
The American dream was built on the automobile. You're never taking that away. The firearm's never being taken away. I don't care what anyone on the left says. It's never happening. You're never going to have a national registry, if you like it or not. It's never going to happen. But how do we actually start having compromise? RFK said it best. How are we actually going to help this country and heal it if we have to stop hating each other first? That's the first thing we got to do.
You need to look beyond yourself. Just because you feel strongly about something,
our politics
be empathetic
isn't
to
us.
somebody's situation.
Just our viewpoints, our beliefs is not who we are. Like it's a response of who we are as a people, but people make that as their identity and they're willing to just completely cut people off from it. And that's not how it is. That's not how it should be. Right. And we've just lost track of that. 15 years ago, it wasn't the case. Now it is because, this is where we're at when we get polarization. And, I never thought I would see the day where it got to so bad that legitimate family members and friends and all this would just like have disagreements over it. Like me and you, like we've kind of changed over time, right? Like I've seen you change in terms of your beliefs and all this other stuff, and you were never really political before, but we're at a point now where politics is part of our society. If we want our kids to grow up in a good society, we have to be somewhat involved in some capacity. If that means voting and being responsible voters, that's a way to participate and be responsible. If that means doing your
Especially
own
when you have
thing,
kids.
you have to.
100% right.
You have to. Like, my son's Jewish. Do I really want him growing up in a place where he's going to have vitriol because he was born a certain way? Absolutely not. So I have to vote and be cognizant of that, right? And you have to do that with your daughter. So, being responsible voters, which is something that should be a privilege, where a lot of people don't have that same right in other places of the world, and it's easily taken away. And we should be appreciative of that. And I don't think we really lost sight of that.
I agree. Yeah, man. I agree, man. So if you learned anything today, if Kamala Harris and Joaquin Phoenix taught you anything, is grab your guns, kids.
Kamala Harris. She laughs like the Joker with that cackle.
Yeah, she does. It's wild, man. She really like honed it in for the debate. She really kind of
she's trying her best. And then she picks a guy who just looks like he like lied about his resume as the vice president. He's like, I don't belong here. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's just lost.
She said, I need a blank piece of paper as my running mate.
It reminds me of like guy. Steve Carell's character in The Office, where he's just so unqualified to like do anything.
But yet he's the manager. How? He's just there, but he's got that job. I don't know. I feel like that's what people felt like when Kamala became the vice president. Well, yeah,
it somehow changed in 6 weeks. She went from the worst approval rating in the history of the United States as a VP to where she has a favorable approval rating for the next president, and she has a very good chance of winning. Like, how does that happen? Like, people, your minds didn't just change overnight. Let's be real.
I mean, Trump didn't do the best in the debate.
Even before the debate,
he's changed ever since that near-death experience.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and we get off. One thing I'll give Trump for: he has galvanized a lot of people from the left, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, like mainstream Democrats to his side. That says something. I don't think Kamala will ever be able to do that on the right.
Kamala has Dick Cheney on her side.
Oh, yes, the ones who started the Iraq War and lied about nuclear weapons being there. That's exactly the people I want to be endorsed by.
He was a hard right, though.
No, he was a hard right. Stop it. Well, hard right, let's be real, hard right then is different than what it is now. Those boundaries have changed drastically. That fence has been moved over.
I mean, hey, Kamala got guns. She on the left, son. She on the left.
California, by the way.
Her and Tim Walz in their presidential picture, so I don't know. My Nomad, I want to
see Donald Trump with an assault weapon if he wins. Just take a picture of it.
He looks scared. I don't think he's going to do that. He looks scared, bro. I think he's scared of the people on his side. I think they're trying to tell him to rein it in, and they were like, look, we can get you. Look at that scar. We got you. If we want you dead, we'll get you dead. But conspiracies aside, this was a good one, my Nomads. I hope you learned some. Peace. Second Amendment is your right. Be creative.